In today's video, I'm going to show you how I take one of my favorite light sources and modify it for beautiful results. My favorite light source? A garage door. Hey everybody, Lindsay Adler here. I consider myself a master of studio lighting, and yet there's just something special about natural light. In particular, my favorite type of natural light, which you see here, which is garage door lighting. It is not fancy, but it produces such beautiful results. Basically, garage door light is like a giant window. So it is a huge indirect soft light source. And because it's blocked off overhead, it means the light is going to be flatter, which is a little bit more light in the eyes, bigger catch lights. So it is a beautiful light, but if you know how to modify it, you can get quite a few different results. All right, so today what we're going to do is I'm going to show you 5 ways that I modify garage door light. We're going to talk about the distance of our subject. I'm going to show you how you can add different reflectors and negative fill to control the shadows and the bounce of light. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about your camera angle. So with that, let's get started. All right, so let's begin with the distance of our subject. What I mean by distance is the distance of the subject to the front of the door. The closer they are to the front of the garage door, the more the light is going to be sculpted from the top down. You're going to get more shadows underneath the cheekbones and jawline. It's going to be a little bit more of the light coming in from the sky. The light will be a little bit more specular. But the further you place your subject back into the garage, the light starts to narrow. It gets blocked up off the top. Also, you're going to get a little bit more negative fill on the sides. And so the light becomes much more flat because the light source is directly in front, whereas when they come closer, the light is coming from above. So let me show you what that looks like on my beautiful subject. We'll start her further back from the door. Perfect. And now let's come back this way. All right, so let's compare these 2 shots. When my subject is further back in the garage, do you see how there's beautiful large catch lights in her eyes? There's a lot of fill in the shadows underneath her neck. Her eyes have a lot of light. And overall, the light is pretty flat. It's not very specular. But when she steps forward, look at how the light is much more top down. You can see the sculpting underneath her eyelids, underneath her cheekbones, and jawline. Now, I do want you to notice that when the subject stepped forward, the background appeared darker. And that's because as she moved closer to the front of the garage, it became brighter on her. And to compensate, I then brought the exposure down. She's brighter, it'll make the background appear darker. So what do you do if you don't want a pure black background? Well, you move your background up. So I'm talking about the distance of the subject, but don't forget you can also move your background. So that is our first variable for control. For our next modification, I am going to introduce bounce reflectors. But specifically, I want to show you a tool called a Triflector. I have loved this for a long time in my beauty photography because it gives me a lot of control without having to have assistants hold the reflectors, and I can be really precise with my adjustments. So first, let me take a shot without the Triflector so you can see a starting place of what the light is looking like, and then I'm going to introduce it into the scene. Now, this is the exact same technique I would be using in studio lighting, but we are going to use our main light as the garage door. What's great about a Triflector is exactly that, the tri part of it. There are 3 reflectors. They can either be silver or white. In this case, there are also ones for negative fill that are black. But what's really nice is I can modify each one. So here, I can bounce more light into her eyes. I can also adjust this reflector, for example, to put a little bit more fill on the side of her cheeks. And so let me show you what it looks like now. All right, so let's compare these shots. In the first shot, it still looks nice. That's why I love garage door light. She has nice sculpting on her cheekbones and jawline. But when I add the Triflector, look at how much more light there is in her eyes. It's brighter, it's smoother, it's softer. Now, the key to remember is it's not, in this case, about which one looks better on her. It depends on your subject. So I actually really like her with a little bit more shadow and the sculpting. However, in most people, having a little bit of fill, that glow from below, is really helpful for wrinkles and blemishes, or it gives them a little bit more of an angelic look. So I think it's a really beautiful effect, but it does depend on what you're trying to go for with the shot. Same thing. The distance changes the effect. The reflectors change the effect. Which one is more flattering for your subject? All right, so now that we've taken a look at these bounce reflectors, we're going to move on up in size and take a look at V-flats. V-flats are an important tool in the studio for controlling the bounce of light. Do you want to take your main light, use it to bounce into the V-flat and fill in the shadows? Well, then you use the white side. Or do you want to prevent the light from bouncing off a nearby wall? You use the black side. So we're going to start off by using a white bounce fill. Now, one thing to keep in mind when you're in a garage, a lot of times you aren't controlling what the color of the walls may be. Maybe they're a dark brown or a stone. Well, all of that color will affect your final shot. It will be bouncing. So you may even just want V-flats to control the colors of the walls. Now, in this case, what I'm going to do, let me show you what it looks like without any V-flat modification, and then we're going to bring them in just to lift up the shadows on either side of the face, give a little bit more of a glowy look to this image. All right, here's our starting point. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at the difference. What you'll notice is once we've added the V-flats in, it lifts up the shadows and the cheekbones and jawline, and everything just gets a little bit smoother. It's a little bit more creamy of a quality of light on her face. Now, in this case, it's actually really subtle. You don't see a lot of difference because the light is mostly coming in from the front, so you're not bouncing too much of it. However, where it will matter is later on when we change our angle, but I'm jumping ahead. So right now, this is a modification with white V-flats. Now let's take a look at modification number 4 when we flip these inside out and turn them to negative fill. What that's going to do is prevent the bounce of light. So let's see negative fill. Okay, now we can really see a big difference. When we've switched from the white V-flats to the black V-flats and negative fill, look at how dramatic it carves out her cheekbones and jawline. It looks beautiful. For a more emotive shot where you may be doing a high contrast black and white, lots of emotion in the person's face, negative fill is going to be beautiful because it'll bring out texture and drama. But if you're trying to go for maybe a friendlier headshot, then negative fill probably isn't the way to go and you'd switch it around to white. But once again, it's about control and you making that decision. All right, so we've talked about our distance, we've talked about bounce reflectors, white V-flats, black V-flats. Last but not least, let's reset and talk about how your angle changes the shot. All right, last but not least, now it is time for us to move our camera angle. Here's what I want you to think of. When you're talking about this big garage door light, basically it's a giant softbox. So imagine in a studio setting. If you're photographing with the softbox straight onto your subject, right behind your camera, you are photographing the area of the subject's face that is being lit. But if you keep everything the same and then you just move around behind, you're starting to move to the shadow side of the face. I'm seeing a lot more shadows and darkness. And if I turn my subject's face towards me, now I'm getting a ton of shadow. So I'm sculpting the light by moving her face and moving my angle rather than moving the light source, which in this case, obviously we can't move. So think of it like that. Rather than moving the light around, you're moving yourself and your subject, and it's fundamentally doing the same thing. So let's just see that in action. And of course, keep in mind, if you're moving, you probably would have to move your background if you still want a clean background behind your subject. So here is straight on to my lovely subject. This is with the light flat onto her. But now I'm coming around to the shadow side. Beautiful. And now I'm getting Rembrandt light on her face. Now this is Rembrandt light when she's turning and looking at me, but I can get a shot that still has some shadow and sculpting, but not quite as dramatic if I adjust her chin. So same thing, same position for me, just her chin slightly adjusted is now a beautiful short light paramount. Now obviously I can move around to the other side of the subject if I want to see more of the light on her face. I can move around to the shadow for something more dramatic. And guess what? We can start combining things. So I can move my subject further or closer to the edge of the garage door, and that will change the quality of light. I can add reflectors, V-flats, negative fill, all of that will change the way the light looks on the subject's face. So it is those 5 variables that I am keeping in mind as I am shooting a portrait with garage door light. It's not just one thing, it's whatever I want it to be. So with that being said, keeping those things in mind, I'm going to get a gorgeous shot of my gorgeous subject. So what's so nice nice about this setup is you don't need a lot of gear. You just need a garage door or even a really large window. Now for this setup, I was shooting with the Canon R5 Mark II and my go-to lens, which is the Canon RF 24-105 2.8. This is a great opportunity to grab one of your fast primes as well, like an 85-1.2 or an 85-1.4, and blur that background out for a really soft and emotive portrait. But keep in mind, it's not about the tools you're using in this particular case. It's what you're seeing, how you're interacting with your subject, and how you're sculpting the light. So if you want to check out the gear that I use to make these images, be sure to check out the links in the description below. And as always, please visit Adorama.com. Thanks everybody, and I'll see you next time.